wrong. Of course, we'll come down to these financial crises because obviously the market cannot decide what is right and what is wrong. Humans decide what is right and wrong, but we don't want to take that responsibility. So it has never always been so. Let's look at Adam Smith. He was the father of economics, free markets. But before he started writing economics, he was a philosopher. He was a moral philosopher. So he wrote the theory of moral sentiments. Let's look at David Hume, another philosopher. Now, both of them said in their writings that friendship, love, concern for others, the common good were extremely important to develop a flourishing society and a good society. And this is the man who's talked about the invisible hand, about the free markets. But he was very concerned about the free markets and what they would do to society. And we ignore that now because after 60 years, we just don't want to talk about that part of Adam Smith for the reasons I've given you. David Hume said the same thing. And now recently, have you heard of Amartya Sen? He's a Nobel Prize winning economist. And he wrote something called On Ethics and Economics. And he bemoans, he says, it's a terrible shame that economics has thrown ethics out because of the reasons I give you, because we think that we can do positive economics and we can affect change and goodness just through the market. So these writers who are, he's a philosopher, but they're economists, and they think that we should have ethics in economics. And, I'll talk about behavioral finance later. So, where are my glasses? So this is where we stand right now. And it's a pretty sorry state, where we've come. And I'd like to say that Alan Greenspan, who was the former Federal Reserve chairman, just to show you how ingrained this whole market economics and the free market will decide. He was so shocked that when they didn't have much regulation of the financial markets because he thought markets can regulate themselves, did not stop the financial crisis in 2008. He thought the financiers would have enlightened self-interest and continue to regulate themselves. And he himself was shocked. Of course, they would take care of their self-interest. But in taking care of their self-interest, the financiers, they forgot about the effect on the whole of society. And Adair Turner, who was the chairman of the Financial Services Authority in England, actually said that 90% of the financial instruments that were developed and was innovated had no social purpose, which meant that you just had the financial instruments to make money for the financial sector. So what can we do about this, about the desolate history of ethics in finance? Well, this is what my institute would like to be a space. We'd like to be an online space for people to have ideas. How do you synthesize ethics into financial theory? I'm not saying that modern finance theory is bad. I'm just saying that modern finance theory is incomplete. It can be improved. It has been good. It's given us a lot of models. We can, have a framework to think about finance, to think about how to make money, to think about measuring the value of companies. It's all been good. But just as, we say, well, Marxist theory is incomplete. It was only a partial truth. But no one ever says modern finance theory is a partial truth. It's incomplete. It can be improved on. I mean, capitalists will be more than willing, especially, really ultra-right wing, to call Marxists socialists and, denigrate them and all that. But, they don't realize that it's based on a theory. Just as what the ideology they're pursuing based on free markets is also based on a theory, modern finance theory. And so I'm just saying that modern finance theory, just like Amartya Sen says about economics, it's incomplete. It can be improved upon. How can we improve upon it? Well, I'm sure there are quantitative ways to make better models, but I think that the models can also incorporate ethics into it, so that we don't have to keep having regulations. Do you know the Fed, and we have something called the Dodd-Frank bill, 2,000 pages of regulation, but they're regulating past problems. There will always be future problems that regulators cannot think about. You need people to think about it who are in the business thinking, is what I'm doing right? Should I be manufacturing these CDOs so much? Or should I be selling all these home loans to these people and trying to tell them that it's really cheap rate? Is this all good for society? Is this good for the person? Is it good for my company? Instead of saying, well, will it maximize profits? So that's the wrong question. So I have a suggestion, and I'm not smart enough like Amartya Sen, Nobel Prize winner, but I have one suggestion that we can go to incorporate ethics in finance. Now, there are three major financial theories aside from, okay, I know this is modern finance theory, but there are two other theories which are outside modern finance theory. So we have modern finance theory, which we call the Western way of thinking, perhaps. Then we have behavioral finance theory. And then we have, I should say, the third paradigm is Islamic finance. So these three compete with each other right now. Of course, this is dominant. Modern finance theory is the dominant theory. We have behavioral finance. What is behavioral finance theory? Does anyone know? It is a theory which came out in the late 1980s, which looks at the behavior of individuals and groups in financial decision making, and it's all based on psychology. So the evidence which we found was, the real world evidence which counted this. They can explain why there were anomalies, because MFT does not take into account psychology of individuals and groups. So for instance, what are the two things which run markets? Fairness and trust. Fairness is not taken into account at all, right? Doesn't matter, fairness. It's just rational. But behavioral finance theory, for instance, has this experiment called the ultimatum game. And this experiment has been carried out throughout the world in all cultures, Latin America, North America, Asia, Europe. And the ultimatum game is when you have two players. One is called the proposer, and one is called the responder. The proposer is given a large sum of money, $500, let's say. The responder knows this, and the proposer is asked, okay, proposer, you can give some of your $500 to the responder, from 0 to 100%. And if the responder accepts your offer, you both get to keep, okay? So let's just say Raj is given $500, and he says, I will give to Kara, the responder, of the 500, I'll give her $100. If I accept it, I get to keep 100, he gets to keep 400. So this is called the ultimate game. If I reject it, neither of us get any money. So according to MFT, if Raj gives me $2 out of 500, I should be super rational and say, $2 is better than 0, I'll accept it. But what they found is that if anyone gives less than 20%, the responder rejects it. So they rather, because they think it's not fair. So if Raj has given me less than, what's 20% of 500? 100, right? So he gives me 50, I'll reject it. Normally someone will reject. He gives me 75, I'll reject it. Not rational, right? According to MFT. I'm not maximizing my profit. I should be saying $75, oh, give me 75, give me 2. Whatever you give me is better than 0. But they found that in most countries, most people, no matter what culture, anything less than 20%, the responder rejects it because they say it's not fair. So this is another example where MFT has been refuted by experimental evidence in behavioral finance. So they use psychology to tell you why financial people make the decisions they do and why securities are priced the way they are. So this is one aspect which MFT doesn't have. Perhaps we should join it together, use a little bit of psychology and from behavioral finance, and make MFT a better, more improved theory. And the person who kind of started or developed behavioral finance, his name is Kahneman. And surprisingly, he won a Nobel Prize in economics, even though he's a psychologist in 2008 or 2007. So I think the people in Sweden were trying to say, like, pay attention to behavioral finance. Okay, so maybe we can synthesize a little bit of this, okay? How about Islamic finance? This one takes into account psychology. This one takes into account ethics. Because Islamic finance is unapologetically ethical in that finance must be done for the good of the community, for the good of the individual. That is the first principle. And it gives a whole list of different ethical principles. You're not allowed, of course, to charge interest or riba because you cannot make money from money. And the money should be used to help other people develop businesses, which would help develop the community. And instead of adversarial, lender, borrower, and you always want the borrower to give you back money, it is always equity partnership. I'm helping you, you're helping me. And we can go a lot more into Islamic finance, and Professor Bala has written a book, so he can tell you more about it too. So the ethics part, the psychology part, the quantitative part of these three models of finance, can we synthesize them and make one very much more developed finance theory which takes into account ethics? So that when you have someone in Wall Street saying, oh yeah, ethics, whatever, they usually roll their eyes. They don't say that. They'll say like, okay, is this good for our partner? Is this good for the business? Is this good for the community? Just like what Islamic finance theory tells its practitioners to do.